pure receptivity. Their subconscious minds are so open. You want to change a child, you can't do it by battering them down with, you're doing bad, you're doing this shit. It doesn't work. There's a woman in Michigan that I got to know very well. Her name was Mary. She had a farm in Michigan where she took care of children that the state gave up on. Absolutely gave up on them. They put them in foster homes. People would get rid of them. I can't handle this. Take them back. The state would take them back. They try to find a place for them. And last resort would be Mary. And she had 17 of these kids in her home, and her husband. And I said to her, Mary, I said, how is it you can do what nobody else does with these kids? What's the secret? She said, well, Ron, she said, my husband and I discovered something very interesting about children. She said, children respond more to what you say about them than they do to what you say to them. Get this message. You got children, right? They say more. They believe they respond more to what you say about them than what you say to them. And I said, how's that? What do you mean by that? She said, well, let me tell you what happens. When the children misbehave in this house, we have very strict rules because we have to. These kids are unruly, and it's an environment we have to maintain the rules. So we're very strict. So if a child misbehaves, we make them go to the basement during dinner time. They can't sit at the table with us at dinner. And she says, we know the nature of a child. We tell them to go to the bottom of the stairs and stay. But we know they won't do that because children are curious and they want to hear what's going on at the table. So they come back up to the top of the stairs, put their ear to the door, and they listen to the table talk. We call it table talk. So what we do is we start talking, my husband and I, about how much progress that child's made since they've been here, and how much improved they are, and how they're doing so much better. Instead of talking about all the bad things they've just done and they're being punished for, we talk about their great progress. And guess what? That gets in their brain, and that's how they see themselves. And they start behaving the way we see the improvements. She says, so what we've learned is children respond more to what you say about them than what you say to them. How many times have you heard somebody talking to another person about their own child who's standing right here saying, well, I just can't get her to eat. She eats like a bird. She won't eat any, whatever, all the negative stuff. Here's a little child sitting here listening to all this stuff. That child's going to be just like they say. Or terrible twos. You've heard that one? Terrible twos. What a thing to say about your child. So you put all these seeds in their mind, and they absorb it like a sponge. And then they behave that way, and they wonder why they have children they can't understand and get them to behave. So remember that if you're dealing with the children. Try to use that in a positive way, Okay.
How does that work with adults? What's the formula with adults?
I think it works very similar. There's I saw some interesting psychological studies one day on TV. They were showing how they were doing experimentation on how people react to being excluded or disliked by groups. And so they would call these people in to be hired. And it was all set up. The people didn't know what was going on that came in. And what they do is they put them in a room after they'd interviewed them. And they knew that they could hear in the other room. And then they'd go in the other room, the people that put this experiment on, and they would talk real bad about this person. I don't think it'll work out. It's not the kind of people we want around here. All this stuff they'd say. And it would just demolish. And I didn't tell you, they had EKG hookups. And they had all these heart monitors, and they had all this stuff on these people. They had no idea it was for this test. They thought it was for another thing. As it turns out, what happened was those people that were being ostracized by this community of people caused great, extraordinary duress on the entire physiological system of that person. And they were recording all this data, and they said, my God, we couldn't believe what. And then they would do the opposite. They would do the praising and what a great person it is. And by the way, praise and thanksgiving, I'm going to teach you that. It's the key of it all. It's the mystery of mystery. I said a magic wand, that's the magic wand. If you can praise and give thanks and trust in good, I'll change your life. I'll make a life a blissful good thing for you. You'll make it yourself. I won't make it for you. And that's simply because that's the only thing you need to learn in life about how to deal with life. It sounds too simplistic. I say in my book, it's a child could understand it, but an adult won't because it's got to be more complex than that. It can't be that simple, But truth is simple. And when I learned it, I spent 9 years learning it in a hard life. And I was full of cursing and accusing when I went in prison. I was I was the devil's advocate. Somebody want to talk something about God, I would talk about the devil. I was the worst guy in the world. I didn't have any consciousness of anything positive. And I spent my life in accusing myself and accusing others. And then I finally got to a place where I couldn't beat him and I wasn't going to join him in prison. I made a jail breaks. I got out of prison. I sawed through prison bars. I've done things you wouldn't know. I broke out of a courtroom, took off running. They had to chase me down with a 45 on my back. I mean, I was a terror. So I finally got to a point I couldn't beat him. I wasn't going to join him. And I got in a period of my life where I was totally apathetic. I didn't care either. We couldn't beat him. I'm not going to join him. I didn't care anymore. I tried suicide. Seriously, very much tried it. And tried it a couple times. Anyway. And then the third response, there's only 3 responses in life. You can find fault, accuse yourself and others. You can be apathetic and don't care. A lot of people are apathetic. And then you can get to the point where I finally woke up, and that's called praise and thanksgiving. And I'll tell you how powerful it is. It opened up my prison. I went before the parole board after 9 years of imprisonment, and the parole board said, Ron, we're going to keep you for 2 more years. You're not ready for parole. And you know what I said? How am I going to praise God and give thanks? Listen to this. Because God's in each of you. He dwells in all of us. We're the temple of the living God, all of us. I said to the parole board, thank you. And as I turned to go, the head of the parole board said, what did you say, Watson? And I turned around. I said, thank you. He said, what are you being facetious? What are you, a wise guy? I said, no, sir. He said, why do you say thank you? I said, well, sir, I believe the years of wisdom on this board is greater than my age. It must be right, or you wouldn't have made that decision. So I praised him. I turned to go again. They said, get back here, Watson. And I turned around, and all of them are doing this to each other, nodding back and forth. I said, Watson, we changed our mind. We've decided to send you to New York. You have 2 armed robberies they want you there for. After 9 years, they want to take you to trial. So it sounded like out of the pot into the fire, but it didn't turn out that way. I went to New York, and long story short, I was released. Never went back to prison. I beat it for lack of speedy trial, and I was free. Okay, my freedom came from praise and thanksgiving, and I've lived my life that way ever since, based on 3 things, 3 basic things: faith in good, or if you want to, faith in God. Your faith in good or God is counted unto you as what? Righteousness. It makes you right. I based it on another belief that all things work together for good for them that love God. I believe that with all my being, that all things, not some things, but everything works together for the highest good for them that love God. The third thing I do is I believe is that the scripture says, let the fruit of thy lips, listen to this, folks, let the fruit of thy lips be the sacrifice of praise, and in all things give thanksgiving. In all things. Not some things, but in everything. There's another scripture that says, rejoice evermore, pray without ceasing. And the word pray isn't what it means. The word praise came from pray. Or pray came from praise. Let me say it that way. So it's saying, rejoice evermore. You try to be joyful all the time. That's what it's supposed to, that's what it says. Rejoice evermore, praise without ceasing, and in all things give thanks, for this is the will of God concerning you. People say they believe in God. I say, good. You want to do His will? Yeah, sure I do. What's His will? Be joyful, be praising, and be thankful. And trust in good, no matter what the illusion is. In India, they call it maya, illusion. The belief that you're separated from good. It's an illusion. How can you be separated from God? He's infinite, He's omniscient, omnipotent, omnipresent. You can't be. So when you experience things in your life that seem to be other than good, I'm giving you the mystery of it all. Don't curse. Praise and give thanks and trust in good, because you'll overcome it. You'll transcend it. You'll transform it. You'll transmute it. You'll resurrect off of that cross that you're on. And I guarantee it works. I could spend hours, I could spend several hours doing nothing but sharing mysteries of magic that's happening in our lives by knowing this knowledge and using it and working on that level all the time, trying to stay on that level. I'll give you a couple quick examples, and I give it all the time, and it's one of the most magical ones of all my events was when my dog got hit by a car. A dog is about as big as this one, St. Bernard Shepherd, and I was just out of prison. And we were walking down the road, and all of a sudden the dog ran out in front of a car going about 50 miles an hour, and he got splattered. He got thrown about 40 feet, and he landed on the cement, and I ran over to him, and he was bleeding from the nose, and he was dead. And as I ran over there, I was cursing, which is the normal human response. Curse, God damn, whatever you can say. I was saying it. And as I ran and I got to the dog, the driver stopped. He came over and stood next to me. And then I remembered the scriptures, and I remember what I'd been taught. And I stopped cursing, and I just said, first thing I said was, in my heart was, how can this be good? How can this be good? The second thing I remember thinking was, how am I going to praise and give thanks for this? I don't have it to give. But the scripture says, let the fruit of thy lips be what? Sacrifice. It means give up something you don't even feel or have. If you ask me for $100 and I've only got 70, I give you the 70 as sacrifice. I'll give it to you. But that's a sacrifice. So I said, praise the Lord, thank you, and I stopped cursing. The guy who was standing next to me thought I was crazy because he's listening to me saying it. I said it out loud. I said, praise the Lord, thank you. And then I remember I had a moment of thought. I thought, who knows, maybe I'm being protected from some future evil. For this dog might attack some child later in life. Maybe there's something I'm being protected from because I couldn't see good in this at all. And as I had that thought, this dog jumps up off the cement and starts running. He ran behind a house. He got caught in a fenced-in yard. I got a leash on him, caught up with him. By the time I got home, he wasn't even limping. People say, well, around it would have happened anyway. Don't tell me that. I've been working and seeing miracles in my life all the time. I could do this for hours. People that tried to rip me off. A company went bankrupt after we gave them a lot of money. How do I praise that? We bought all this furniture. It didn't get delivered. We find out they went bankrupt. I ended up moving from Chicago to California, and I get a call from this company, and they reorganized themselves. Said, Mr. Watts, are you still interested in all that furniture? And I said, yes, I just bought a new home in California. I'd love to have new furniture. Said, well, you're the only person who will lose money because you only gave a third down. Everybody else gave a half down. We'll not only give you the furniture, but we'll throw in this and we'll throw in that. You want a different color? I said, yeah, I need a different color because I'm in a different house that needs different color. So I got all this furniture delivered without losing a penny and got more than I would have gotten the original deal. Plus, I got a color that matched the home I was in. On and on and on. I didn't have to transport that heavy furniture from Chicago into California, which would have cost me a bundle anyway. I could go on and on about how this worked for good. But who would have told me when the company declared bankruptcy that there could be good in this? You get what I'm getting at? This is the kind of miracles you'll see once you start doing it. But you have to have a little faith in good. Or maybe I need to say faith in God, because that's what will make it work. And if this is the message you get from this group, from this class, I've done my job. If that's all I gave you, because I've given you the keys to great changes in your transforming life, to see things happen that'll make miracles happen daily in your life if you start doing it. Praise, give thanks, trust in good. Don't accuse. Don't get caught in it. All right, my gosh. The preaching is over. Let's get back to astrology. So I want you to understand all the dynamics. Remember I said earlier, we were talking, B was telling me about, I said you've got Saturn conjunct Venus, a lot of lessons in relationship, right? Venus, and by the way, she spoke her chart with the table. I love it when people talk because they talk their chart all the time. She says, I want to bring peace and love to my Saturn. I said, B, do you realize what you just said? You've got Venus conjoined with Saturn. What's she trying to do? She's trying to bring peace and love, Venus, to Saturn because they're together in their chart. That's an amazing statement. But people talk their chart all the time. They don't know they're doing it because they don't know astrology. They don't see it. Okay? But notice what I said at the bottom of this page here. Who's got the book open to that page? Anybody? It's about almost the last page of your book. Because B was saying to me over and over again about how, yeah, Saturn at the very bottom, see it? The teacher, what does it say? Good, good, good.
The energy, responsibility for one's actions, discipline, control over anger and passion.
Good. Because see, we're talking about control over what? Saturn Mars affliction. What's it trying to teach you? It's trying to teach you responsibility for one's actions, which is Mars actions. Discipline is Saturn. Control is Saturn over anger and what?
Passion.
And passion. Because anger and passion is Mars. So if you had that affliction in your chart, okay, you've got to learn those things in life. Really hard lessons sometimes. It's trying to teach you some. It's not all about, geez, Saturn's in my chart, it's doing this, therefore I'm going to suffer. It's about, what's the message I'm getting out of this? You see what I'm getting? What is Saturn trying to teach me by giving me a square to Mars? Okay? Very often these hard aspects create strength of character because they're not, we see them as negative, but if a person has mastered the energies of that planetary action, what they've done is they've started to be very powerful Mars, responsible Saturn people who discipline their energies. And you see it in their lives, they don't even know they're doing it. He's a good example. My wife's a good example. The epitome of discipline. I mean, I'm always amazed at how much discipline my wife has about what she eats. No sugar, no starches, no this, no that. I mean, you know, and I'm the other way around. Just give me another cookie, you know. But I mean, I'm amazed at it because it's a Saturn-Mars energy being manifest in a very powerful, disciplined way where the energies are being used in a constructive, positive way. He does the same thing. Look at his body. He's worked out. He's used that energy instead of sitting at home and being upset and frustrated and angry, depressed, which is all that planet's actions are about. He's out there doing something about it, see?
I think in better shape, so, you know, have that going on back and forth, you know.
Yeah,
You know, listen, these things are also not just lessons, they're also tools.
exactly.
Not that it's a negative way of looking at that. It's a negative, it's going to teach me a lesson. Oh, it's a tool. It's like bringing you a ladder, and maybe the ladder might have the bottom a little bit more rough. You can still climb it. You know, it's going to hurt your feet a little bit more, but if one looks at it positively, these aren't lessons to learn. It's going to bring you, no, it's a way, it's a tool.
That's right, yeah. And you know, that's it. The bottom line is we tend to demonize Saturn a lot in astrology. We do.
In any sign.
But exactly, you know. And in Saturn, and if you read my book, you know, some of you have some, but in my book, I have a lot about Saturn, okay? And Saturn, and I told you it was the Kundalini, it's the serpent. You've heard of Kundalini force? In yoga, you've heard of Kundalini, right? That's the serpent on the spine. In the healing arts, it's called caduceus in the medical community. You got the two serpents on the staff. It's symbolic of the Kundalini force of Ida Pingala going up the spine of the body. And if you go back to early times in the scriptures, it said Moses raised up the serpent in the desert for the healing of the nation. Notice what he did it for? He raised up the serpent on the staff. That's right, here's my staff on my spine. And the serpent force is the Kundalini. That's Saturn's energy. Do you remember I told you there's only 3 uses of that energy. You can have you can create a child, you know, you can have a generation. You can, you know, oh, there's so much. The word, listen to the word, desire. You know what the word desire came from?
To sire, right?
Good. It's of the Father. The word desire means of the Father. Okay? So when we raise up that energy, you can use it for a generation of children. You can use it for degeneration. In other words, misuse it. Or you could use it for regeneration by raising the energy up, which India has been teaching that for ages. The Kundalini force, raising it up to the higher levels, the higher chakras, if you would. And then guess what happens? You become enlightened, okay? Because now Saturn, who has been cast out of heaven how? This way. That goes back to the scriptures, it's Peter. Peter was symbolic of this. Peter, upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. The gates of hell are right here. They're right here. Whatsoever bind on earth shall be bound where? In heaven. Whatsoever thou loose on earth shall be lost in heaven, right here. Okay? Peter, when the cock crows thrice, thou shalt deny me 3 times. Rocks, have you ever got your rocks? It's a vulgar expression. All that's Peter. Think it's a coincidence? It's not. Read my book. It's all about it. Tell you about that. So what is it about? It's about raising up that energy, which was what the disciplines of the disciples was about. If you remember the story of Christ, the woman touched him. She had an issue of blood for 12 years. She but touched his garment, and immediately she was healed. And what did Christ say? He turned around and he said, "Who touched me? I behold virtue has gone out of me." What does virtue mean? A virtuous woman is a woman that's continent. It keeps her sexuality. The virtue had gone out of me. In other words, that energy had been pulled out of him for the healing of that woman. That's where healing comes from. That's what that energy is. Yes?
I have to say in a more humble way, I am a healer, and I use Kundalini energy.
That's beautiful. And I believe you too, because I saw your chart. One of the things that I did see, and I've done several of the charts in here, I'm amazed at the charts, quite frankly. I was kind of flabbergasted when I saw them. Some very powerful energies and beautiful charts. I still have to do yours? You've got yours. Who didn't I do? I didn't do, my gosh, I got to do you. Okay, who else? You have yours?
You have mine already.
Okay, before we leave tonight, make sure I do your charts, because I want you to study them and look at them and start to learn with them. And don't write on them, and go ahead and do things with them, because I can make as many as you need. So, help you learn the symbols. Okay, we've covered a lot of stuff, but I want you to just get the feeling of all this. I want you to, so when I say to you, as we start going along in this class, I'm going to start throwing out questions to the group, and I won't embarrass anybody, but, I'll ask you questions, and I'll say, what happens with Mars afflicting Mercury in a chart? What does that mean? Somebody can already tell me that, I bet. What do you think it would do? What would Mars-Mercury affliction mean? Good. Could be argumentative, right? Very good answer. Combative in speech. In other words, likes to battle with people. They'd make good debaters sometimes. You say that over?
Debaters and lawyers, yeah.
Yeah. Did you say lawyers?
Yeah.
Boy, that's right on. Very good. That's the kind of thing that would be there. I had Mercury square Mars when I was born. And until I was about 12 years old, I stuttered very badly. And I also had been beat a lot as a young child in boarding homes and places of living. So if anybody moved an arm next to me, I would do this. I did that until high school, until they started playing a game in high school when I was a kid where they punch you if you flinched. It was a game. If you flinched, if somebody acted like they're going to hit you, and you flinched, you had to take a blow to the shoulder. And I'd go home black and blue. But you know what it did? It helped break that habit, because I didn't want to be black and blue every day. And you know how kids can be. They're very cruel. And they knew I was a good sucker for that one. But I stuttered. And I went to bed till I was 12 years old. I had all sorts of emotional problems. But one of the things that I did was stutter. And my stepdad, I used to think he was my dad till I was 13. I found out he wasn't my real father. But he used to make me stop when I'd start to stutter. He'd say, "Okay, Ron," he said, "I want you to just think of what you're going to say and start over and say it." And it's interesting, because what is Mars? It's action, speed, too fast. Everything's too fast, afflicting my Mercury. And that helped me overcome that habit. And then I went to high school and I started taking speech classes to help overcome it. And all these things helped me. And would you believe I ended up making my living talking and being on the radio and doing radio shows all over the United States. I used to have a show called New Dimensions in Health. And we made a living, a great living selling ionization equipment, which I helped develop some of it. But I would have never thought my life would be, what, from here? You know, it's amazing.
That's kind of transcending within your zodiac.
Good for you.
Yeah.
It's what we're talking
That's what
about.
I'm teaching you tonight with the one from
Exactly. Same as Saturn, right? It's the same thing, learning to make it into a positive.
You know, I have this theory I thought about just a few months ago, that whatever we have as a weakness, it could be turned into, what could be our weakest thing could become our strongest thing.
Very good.
And vice versa. I didn't read about this, I guess you thought about this a
Yeah.
few months ago.
Yeah.
You know, and another thing else I want to mention about the Kundalini and the regeneration, degeneration. It's like a rocket. A rocket releases all of this, goes up, and then after a while it's expended itself. Now it's just in space. It has no more power. You know?
That's a good, a good one.
Yeah.
Well, let me tell you something about this, not the Kundalini, we're talking about turning things around. Oh, I've lost my thought there on that one.
Weakest and strongest.
Oh, the weakest and strongest, yeah, yeah. There's a scripture says of Christ that said, what is it? He ascended. But that he did what first? He descended in the lower parts of the earth. The ascent presumes the descent. If you look at the lives of many great and bad people, in fact, actually, they've been powerful. They've spent like time in prison before. Hitler was in prison for 2 years before he came to power. So you saw what came out of that 2 years. He came out with a terrible, you know, direction. Gandhi.
Unlike you came out with the same direction.
Yeah, exactly. And then Gandhi, look at Gandhi. He was in prison before, and he came out the same way. Look at Mandela.
Yeah.
You know, these people spent years in prison. And
This is history, and history by the victors. There's a lot of propaganda in the history we read. Sometimes when we think it's a bad thing, may not really be as bad as, because Alexander the Great was the great, yet he's like a Hitler.
yeah, oh yeah,
So
yeah.
it's the same exact thing. One's
Yeah.
a monster, one's a great guy.
Yeah, that's
They're
right.
both killed.
That's right, that's
So
right.
We gotta be careful how we receive this.
That's right, it's true. So are you getting a feel for this? Is this all making sense a little bit now? I kind of get all over the place, but I know where I'm going. I know where I'm going to take you, so, okay. Some examples of Mars in a chart. Do you remember I told you, did I tell you the story of my daughter called me about her boyfriend?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I said he's got a scar on his head or face, probably his head, I said. And then she calls me the next day and she's so excited, you know, Dad, he's got a scar. Anyway, Mars afflicted in the Aries or in the first house, look for injuries, scars, marks, birthmarks to the head and face. Personality may be rough and tough. I remember we were visiting my wife's, what is her relationship to you, Elena? Elena? She must have left. In Holland, we were visiting a relative of hers, and they had a little child, a young child about my son's age at the time, maybe 6 or 7 years old. And we were sitting at a table, and I did his chart, and I said, he should have a birthmark on his back, because Mars was in Leo, right on, and it was really strongly afflicted. So he should have a birthmark on his back, and they were freaked out, because they had to surgically have it removed. It was so big. So, you know, but where does that come from? You know what I mean? You say, how can you know those things? And he's a scientist. He's a professor at a university. And, of course, he didn't think much of astrology. Neither did his wife, who's also a professor. And so these kind of things always blow people out of the room. You know, how can you know those things? So Mars can mar. What is the word itself? I got a mark or a Mars. That's Mars energy. And Mars afflicted in Taurus, or the second house, injury, scars to the throat, tonsils removed, possible fight or anger over property in life. Why? Second house Taurus is money and possessions. If it's afflicted in that sign or house, the second house, do you remember the little color chart I did with the houses are the places, the planets are the energies? Remember all that? Okay, and the attitude is the signs. So, you know, you might see that. Mars afflicted in Gemini or the third house. Look for injury scars to the arms and hands and lungs. Advise against smoking. Why would you want them not to smoke? because they're going to have damage to their lungs. Mars in Gemini can do that. Okay. Conflict with brother or sister is likely during lifetime. Possible speech defect or stuttering at some point. Okay. So he's having a great time, isn't he? They pick up the energy so much of people. The cats do. If Elaine and I are having an argument and we raise our voice or something, they will attack the girls. The Siamese will attack. They'll actually climb. They'll attack us. Yeah, whoever. You know,
Equal opportunity.
yeah. You know, if we're really getting upset with each other, and you know, they'll start meowing real loud, and the next thing you know, they may just put their claws in us. They won't put up with it. You know. Yeah. And Zeus is the. And Zeus is. Yeah, and Zeus is the. Yeah. Okay, so Mars afflicted in Cancer, 4th house, look for injuries, scars, birthmarks, or to the breast or stomach. Ulcers, conflict in home with family, particularly the wife and mother. Possibly fires in the home, Mars in the 4th house, or the Cancer. Okay, I was doing a chart for afflicted means square in opposition, affliction. Yeah, you know, it's a square, a stress aspect. Yeah, I was doing a chart for this woman, and she was like talking about her husband all the time. This is some time back, and she's sitting there at my desk, and I'm doing her reading on her chart, and I said, you know, oh, she kept saying about her husband. Every time she'd refer to her husband, I'm just fed up to here with him. I'm just fed up to here with him. After a few of those, I looked at her and I said, Phyllis, I want to ask you a question. I said, don't get alarmed or offended by this, but when's the last time you had constipation? Do you believe I asked her that? And she looked at me unbelievably. She said, how the hell do you know that? I was in the hospital with it. It's that bad. I said, because you're fed up to here. You think that doesn't have an effect, the Word? The Word is made flesh. I mean, I was giving a class one time, and two of my students in the back, they were sisters, beautiful girls, and they were in the back, and I hear a kind of eureka thing, like they got this enlightenment all of a sudden in the back of the room. And I said, what's going on back there? I said, well, we just figured it out. Figured what out? I said, well, you know, we never could figure out why our dad is going deaf. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, every time we came home with any kind of problems, my dad always said the same thing to both of us. Said, I can't bear to hear, just talk to your mom. I can't bear to hear, just go talk to your mom. And he can barely hear today. Another woman I know that had, she was a friend of my doctor, his doctor's wife. We used to do lectures in California called The Physician and the Metaphysician. And he's a top doctor. He's one of the top in the country. He was chief physician at McDonnell Douglas Space Center. You know he's a good doctor. So we used to work together. We were close friends. And his wife had a lot of problems. I mean, she did. She was really a problem. And Scandinavian woman. But she would, her favorite expression all the time was, I can't stand this, can't stand that, can't stand this. She ended up in a hospital with varicose veins so bad in her legs she couldn't stand anymore. But, you know, I try to tell her, I say, you know, you're creating this, you know, and you're going to keep. Another guy, his favorite expression was, I got no stomach for it. I got no stomach for this. He ended up losing 2/3 of his stomach with surgery for ulcers. You say, well, it's coincidence. No, it's no coincidence, you know. If you listen to people real well, if you're counseling people, you're working with people, you're trying to help them lives, listen well. Be a good listener, not just a talker. Because you'll hear their problems. You'll hear them speak them. You know, I listen well. When you spoke your chart, I heard those words. I'm trying to bring peace and love to my Saturn. My God, that's Venus joined with Saturn in your chart. So listen always, listen well. It's not about talking all the time, it's about hearing. Man, I could just keep on going with this stuff about words and the power of words. And the same class, there was a beautiful girl named Victoria, and her husband was a jeweler. He had a real nice jewelry store. They were a beautiful couple, very much in love. And Victoria's always, her favorite expression was, any challenge that came to her in her life was, I'd always hear her say the same thing, I've got to face it. I've got to face it. And she was a model, by the way. She actually was a model. She'd been photographed and appeared in magazines, and beautiful girl. And guess what happened to her? She ended up with cancer on her face. A cancerous growth on her face. And I sat down with her and I explained to her, I said, I've listened to you, I've known you for a long time. Your favorite expression is, I've got to face this. I've got to face, everything's got to be, I got to face. And guess what? I spent hours just talking with her, trying to get her aware and make her change. She did. And you know what? Cancer went away. It went into total remission on her face. This kind of stuff. I mean, you know what I mean? You think I'm making this up? I'm not. I've been counseling and teaching and lecturing and working with people like this for 30, 40 years now, you know? And, yeah.
You know, now having this information and knowing the power of words, then comes a new dilemma, potentially, of now thinking you gotta tiptoe fearfully into what you're gonna say, creating another bit of confusion in one's life.
Well, you know what? I told
I'm
you.
not saying it's gonna do, but you have to
Yeah,
think about
I did a
how to get
reading.
around this.
He came for a reading, and we did a personal reading. You know, like I said, you know, you've seen transformation in your life in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, right? Yeah. But because you're putting,
My actions, as far as I'm aware of that, which I was thinking before, but that's what I was gonna say, I don't see anything. Can you rephrase that? I see a lot of things.
yeah,
I don't want, no, I don't want to say weird, because I
Yeah.
don't want to get Alzheimer's.
okay.
Don't want to say, as a matter of fact, no comment, I have a comment.
Anyway,
No.
but the bottom line
I'm
is,
positive,
yeah,
I'm
okay.
optimistic.
Yeah, the bottom line is that you're working on the things that we
Correct.
talked about, and you're getting the cursing words out of your vocabulary, and that's important, you know. So, you know, you're rough-hewn, you know, you are, and it's part of your nature. It's all right, but you know, I mean, you've got the qualities to be powerfully transformative in your life. So enough of it. So we went through these. Important. The birth chart does not show. If it doesn't show a basic root meaning, do not infer a meaning. What does that mean? If, for example, let's say in your chart, you've got a perfect aspects to a planet, and I'll show you what I mean by that. I should take some of this chart and do this, but we're going to do that over the next few weeks. We're going to be using your charts with your permission. We'll be looking at them up here as a group and looking and seeing what we can see together. So it'll be a kind of a collaborative thing as we work with these charts. But let's assume, let's say, and I just use my chart for example. I have my sun here with Mercury, and it's in a perfect grand trine to Pluto. Oh, come on. This is right up there. There you go. Pluto. And to Jupiter here. Okay? So let's say, and when you start doing interpretive work or you start doing transits, progressions, and trying to understand when things are going to occur in a person's life, you happen to have Saturn sitting over here. Let's just assume, let's say it's opposition to Sun right here, 180 degrees. A lot of astrologers will look at transit Saturn in the sky right now and they say, oh my God, Ron, you got Saturn opposing your Sun. That's a rough time for your life. You know, the Sun's your life. It's your love. It's, you know, it's all those things. It's your creative energies. This is going to put a damper on all that. I say bullshit, excuse me. I won't say that. But what I would say was that's not possible. And you're going to learn that in this class. You're not going to make mistakes like that. Because Sun opposed Saturn cannot do anything if it's making a perfect grand trine. It's not going to have negative energies. Now, in this case, though, I told you earlier I have my Mars squaring my Sun, don't I? So Mars sits down here, and it's making a cross aspect to the Sun. Now, guess what? Now we can read some meaning into Saturn as an energy that might cause some problems. Because is it not only squaring Mars by being in opposition to the Sun, but this is a T-cross now, perfect T-cross set in my chart. If it had just been this, and somebody had made a bad prophecy because of Saturn's moving there, I would say that can't do anything to me. But because it's doing this, and Mars is in that cross, now there's possibility of some problems. What would I think of as a problem with Mars-Saturn? What would you think might happen with somebody had Mars-Saturn energy afflictions? Anybody want to venture a guess on that? maybe?
You break some bones?
Good. Who said that? Break some bones. My God. That's perfect. Yeah. That's very possible, isn't it? Okay. Or I drive a motorcycle into a tree, which I did one time. So
Or you can become an enforcer and break bones.
it might be the other way around, right? So the point being that, you know, if you see an aspect like this, it also could be problems in the physical body. But you know what? Listen, what it might be. It might be arthritis. Mars is pain, squaring Saturn, the bone skeletal frame, right? The joints and the bones. Okay. So maybe that's what could be, right? It could be something like that. But who's to predict something like that unless you know the nature of the person you're dealing with? Because there are people, and I hope you're going to be one of those people, or 5 or 6 of those people, who will know how to deal with these things and not become victim to them. And what does that mean? It means this. If this is the planet of Saturn, which is the spirit of what did I tell you? What did I tell you Saturn is Satan about?
Accuser.
Good, the accuser. Good for you. And this is Mars, which is anger. Okay? War and all those things, right? If you're dwelling in the past, that's, by the way, Saturn. You remember what Christ said to Peter? Peter, I told you was Satan, Saturn. He said, "Get behind me, Satan." He said that to Peter. "Get behind me, Satan." Because the past is Saturn. Living in the past and dwelling in the past. Remembering hurts and things that people have done to you in the past. That's Saturn. And this Mars square Saturn would be really bringing up that energy. If you're born with that energy in that aspect, okay, you were born with it, okay, in your chart, a Saturn-Mars fiction. One of the things that you had to learn and not be pulled into in your life is accusing. Not, you know what I mean? It's not, what I mean by that is Saturn likes to hold on to things that happened in the past. Very good.
Yeah, I think very good at that.
Now we're getting, I want to hear from you out there. That's what I want to hear. See, so when you have these kind of energies in a chart, and if your childhood has been such that you've been brought up in an environment where there's a lot of accusing and judgmentalness, criticizing and all that stuff, and you don't come out of that, then you're going to have a lot of pain in your life. You're going to have a lot of problems. And a lot of it will transfer into physical problems, like bone, teeth, all things like that. Mars, injuries, accident proneness, things like that. All that can happen. Because as above, so below. You understand? As within, so without. That's the law of we're dealing with. And once we learn this law, we can not only understand it, but we can manipulate it, if you would. We can transform it. We can change our life. But if you don't have any knowledge of it, think about this. If you don't have any sense of your chart, you may go through your whole life and never change anything. You may just walk through it and continue on a process of unknowing. Yeah.
The inverse can also be true, where you're going to have strong bones.
Good.
Because
Yeah.
it's not just, like I was saying before,
You're-
not a negative thing. You're going to have
But what did I say? People that have that aspect tend to do that. Elena's a pure example. She works out. She's the strongest. She's. I'd hate to go in a fight with her. She'd whip my butt. I mean, she is strong. I mean, really strong. You know, nothing like having a man around the house. But she is that way.
Whatever.
Anyway, so, but that's what Saturn and Mars can do, and that's what we were talking about earlier. You can let it. You could become overwhelmed by this, and become a negative, fault-finding, critical, self-doubt, critical, guilty. I'm guilty. Everyone else is guilty type of person.
Right, and that person can that anyone
Yeah.
can transform.
Yeah.
Because it's not a transformation, because you weren't born to, that's pessimistic thinking, well, you were born to be accusing. No, we're human condition, that's the negative side. The other side also is that if you're going to accuse, then you could be the biggest praising person.
There you go.
The biggest uplifter. And
Yeah,
you
it's
were
a-
born with both things, and we will transform into the praising.
You got it.
The same way we can descend into the accuser.
Exactly. The thing is that, you know, there's if you look at the word satirical, we talked about it earlier, is poking fun at other people at their expense. So, you know, you've seen cartoons of satirical humor, you know, Back in the days of Nixon, you saw the swoopy nose, you know, everything's exaggerated. You see Obama with the bigger ears, you know, and things. This is all satirical humor. But it's poking fun at others, and it's satirical Saturn, Satan, if you would, energy being directed at accusing way at some other person. And that's what this is. So some people are artists. There are comedians that are gifted satirical humor. I mean, they're good at poking fun at others. I mean, they're talented at it. They have a gift for it, you know. So, all right, let me see here. A couple things. Yeah. Huh? It is cruel. You're right.
And what they're born with isn't that they're funny, it's that they're just so intelligent, they're so perceiving and discerning that they know how to use that as a tool. Like
Yeah.
I characterize Robin Williams, not as a comedian, as an extremely intelligent person that communicates through humor.
But he's not.
He's intelligent.
But you know what the thing about Robin Williams is? I mean, I used to look so much like him. I mean, so much like him that when I travel, I'd go places. This is when I was with Veronica. We'd go places and I'd walk in a restaurant. They'd fall all over themselves because they thought it was Robin Williams. I'd be on an airplane. People would come over to my chair and, can we have an autograph, Robin? And I would write an autograph. What? Well, listen, no. It wasn't so bad. I would write best wishes from R.W. What's my initials? Ron Watson.
Oh my God, yes! Look at that. So it's not a coincidence that I brought it up now.
No, I'm serious. That's
Oh,
funny.
my chart.
And I used to look so much that people would say, why don't you enter the contest? There's one in Inquirer magazine, lookalikes, you know? And I said, I should have done it because my hair was much longer. And he's got a hairy chest. I don't. I have no hair on my body. But he's just amazing. But we would go places. I remember going to Hawaii and everybody was all over us. We couldn't go. We go in a restaurant and they would serve us like we were kings. And I didn't argue with anybody. You know, Robin. I just say nanu nanu. So, you know. So anyway, so we're talking about Saturn being cruel, and you know, the Saturn is the cross dominating the soul, the feelings. That's why he's called the subtlest of all the beasts, and he's also called, he's divider destroyer. That's what he is, divide, destroy. How do you divide people? And they're also, Saturn is from the word January is Saturn's sign, right? Saturn Capricorn is January, right? The word Janus is from January, is from the god Janus. You know what the god Janus was called? He was a two-faced god. And what does two-faced mean? Well, you know, Elena's really a nice person, but let me tell you about Elena. You know that kind of stuff is that, you know, that little, let me get a little dig in here, you know. That's Saturn stuff. It's very subtle, very...
You know another thing also? The idea about the two-faced, the positive thing is that why it's on January, because it's looking at the past year and looking forward to the future.
Yeah.
So that's also a positive side. You can see the past and the future and you get this perspective of balance.
Yeah. Well, Janus was the two-faced god, and sometimes I remember I had a real close friend who was a Capricorn, and he was the most two-faced guy. I mean, it took me years to figure it out, you know. I mean, to me, he was like the best, but when I'd find out what he'd say about me later, I'd say, my God, I thought he was a friend, you know. But anyway, enough of that. So what I want to do is make sure that this week, what time is it? 9:30, it's time. But what I want to do is, I really want you guys to, I hope I've stimulated a little interest, just a little bit.
Yeah, but not in the Kundalini way, but...
Yeah,
sure.
not in a Kundalini way. The whole thing is that if you're going to be serious about this, you have to treat it with some seriousness. You have to really bear down and study, okay? Get the basics real well. I remember when I started studying astrology in prison that I was going to college before I went to kindergarten. I didn't want to read the basic textbooks because I thought they were too simplistic. And I didn't want to read the little simple things. I wanted to get to the meat of it and, you know, jump ahead. And I happened to come across the book called, now this is in prison, and you know what a book cost? For me to buy a book? I was doing guards' horoscopes, the guards in prison. I was making a living in prison, whatever money you could make in there, which was cigarettes. That's how you get paid in prison. But I would have to order a book, and I would get the guard to give me, you know, get the book for me, because he'd pay me, he had the cash. Anyway, there was a book called Graphic Astrology, and I think it was about $15. That's a month's wages in prison, $15. And I wanted this book, but I remember ordering it, and I thought, after I ordered it, what a mistake. Why did I spend money on this book? This is a basic book of text, astrology. And it's by Ellen McCaffrey. And I'll tell you what, am I so thankful that book came. After I got it, I realized that I really had to go back to the basics again. And I mean, I learned so much from her and from that book. Oh man, like, I won't go into it tonight because I'd get going with it. But you get the basics really firm in your mind. Learn all the symbols, learn their meaning. Start looking at your chart. Now, you've got your charts. I did. We'll do that before you leave. We'll get you one. Okay, we're going to do that. Okay. You're late for something?
Yeah, it took me on an international call. I delayed it 15 minutes.
Oh, good. Let's go ahead and break up. But listen, take your textbook, your workbook. You've got a textbook I gave you. It's brand new. It just came in today. Study it. Start reading, writing, making notes. Write in your books. And let's come back next week with a new vigor and new enthusiasm, because we're going to be getting into actual charts next week. And we'll do each of yours in the group with your permission, as I said.
Sounds good,
Yeah.
favorite, you know.
So we can make fun of Ed. We can make fun of Ed. I mean, you know, we can really tear him up. So let's get.
And I'll act like
Let me
a
get.
Capricorn.
Okay. And we're going to do your chart right now.
Yeah, you already have it in the.
Let's go make sure. And
Thank you, Elena. Thank you, Ron.
okay, I'm a hugger. Okay.
Bye.
Bye bye, dear.
It was a pleasure, really a pleasure. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
Okay. Okay. Well, listen. Thank you, everybody.